Hello and welcome to Nation Watch for today, Sunday, 14 July 2024. As you are aware, we are heading closer and closer to regional and general elections. It is anticipated by many that this could, in fact, be held this year. All the indications are that there's a desperate move by the People's Progressive Party, given its uncertainties, given its questions about its own electability. The People's Progressive Party is on a mad rush to ensure that they can cling to power in this country. And one of the considerations on the table at Freedom House, regional and general elections by early December 2024. The announcement is likely to be made as early as September. So we must be prepared and we must continue to do the work to ensure that the People's Progressive Party is removed from office and replaced by a competent, visionary, caring administration led by the People's National Congress Reform. Lots of things are happening in Guyana, and I pose to you the question today, is Guyana on autopilot? Let's discuss some issues, and by the end of this program, you will determine within your mind whether in fact Guyana is being governed by a set of policies or whether Guyana is in fact on autopilot, with every conceivable senior functionary in the country doing his or her own thing. I start by reading a statement issued by the by the Office of the Leader of the Opposition on the 12th of July, 2 days ago. And it reads thus: corruption at every level of government under the corrupt PPP regime. The opposition had warned when the PPP government refused to investigate Second Vice President Bart Jagdeo after it was alleged that he was involved in bribery and corruption in the Vice News documentary, that the government was opening avenues for corruption to proliferate in the Guyanese society, especially the Guyana Police Force. The recent revelations of corruption at the highest level of the Guyana Police Force and in the Ministry of Home Affairs are the most recent manifestations of what happens when, at the highest level of government, you participate in and condone corruption. Even while there are these blatant acts of corruption at home, ministers and other senior government officials are routinely being hauled in and questioned by the FBI and other law enforcement agencies of foreign governments and their visas being revoked. This does not augur well for the image of Guyana. In fact, Guyana is now being seen as the bastion of corruption and lawlessness in the Caribbean. The time is nigh when corrupt officials must be removed, the Guyana Police Force depoliticized and returned to being a professional law enforcement agency rather than a center for corruption, illegalities, and lawlessness. The police force cannot rid itself of corruption and lawlessness since they are themselves corrupt and lawless. This is compounded by a regime that is both complicit in and perpetrators of corruption and lawlessness and cannot take action against the lawlessness that has now become the norm. In the light of the foregoing, the opposition is demanding that a reputable law enforcement agency such as the FBI be called in to investigate corruption in the GPF, that's the Guyana Police Force, and the other government institutions. This high level of corruption allegedly is occurring at the highest level of government, and therefore the president himself comes over as complicit in the corruption and lawlessness. End of statement. This is a statement issued by the Office of the Leader of the Opposition on the 12th of July, 2024. And I just thought I'd read the statement, laying the foundation for our discussion on Nation Watch today, July 14th, 2024. The statement alludes to corruption in the Guyana Police Force, alleged corruption in the Guyana Police Force. Now, we all are aware that both social media and mainstream media have been carrying stories about allegations of corruption at the high level in the Guyana police force. We read about a senior police officer allegedly attempting to deposit a large sum of money into the police credit union. We read also that the commissioner of police denied this to be the case. He is reported in the media saying that it never happened. And then there were some other revelations with some actual documents coming out there, which in fact indicated to the world that the commissioner of police was not properly informed about the issue before he issued the statement of denial. But what is interesting is that the Guyana Police Force has spoken about an investigation into alleged wrongdoing. Investigations of alleged wrongdoings. What is the nature of this investigation is the first question that comes to mind. Is it an internal departmental investigation or is it a criminal investigation? Has anyone been cautioned about some offense having been committed? Is someone likely to be criminally charged? Are persons within the system being criminally interrogated? These are questions that the Guyana Police Force may consider answering. You see, when it comes to an internal police investigation, there are protocols governing these. Chief among the protocols is the fact that when a senior police officer is alleged to have been involved in some kind of wrongdoing and an internal investigation is launched, then the investigating officer must be senior to the police officer being investigated. In other words, a senior police officer cannot be investigated by an equal or junior rank. And this I understand to be police protocol. So is there an internal investigation? If there is an internal investigation, there's only one rank senior to the gentleman who is said to be on the investigation. You see, the entire police force hierarchy is made up of substantive assistant commissioners of police. Everyone there, including the acting commissioner of police, at substantive rank is an assistant commissioner of police. The commissioner of police acting is set apart from the other assistant commissioners by virtue of his acting appointment as commissioner of police, which I understand has been upheld by the courts in this country. Logically, therefore, if there's to be an internal investigation, the commissioner acting must conduct this investigation, since the person on the investigation is an assistant commissioner. Please don't be carried away by acting deputy commissioner. There is no acting deputy commissioner of police in Guyana. An acting deputy of commissioner of police is an appointment that comes from the Police Service Commission. If the Police Service Commission does not bestow that acting appointment on one is substantively at the rank that he or she is appointed to. So there is no deputy commissioner of police acting. All that is balderdash. But can the commissioner of police, having regard to developments in this matter, conduct an investigation into the officer who is said to be on the investigation? Let's look at it. I'm no lawyer. I'm a regular citizen of this country like everyone, well, most people looking on. Neither am I a police officer, or have I ever been. But here's the thing. The acting police commissioner came out with a statement saying that no such thing ever happened. In other words, this gentleman never attempted to deposit any large sum in this credit union. But then, subsequent to that statement, which could be put down to the gentleman, the acting commissioner, being uninformed or not fully informed, information was released into the public by person or persons which suggest that there was, in fact, a deposit made and money returned. How does that affect the acting police commissioner were he to be charged with an internal investigation, the conduct of an internal investigation? It appears as though if it's internal, it's going nowhere. If it is a criminal investigation, it also seems to be going nowhere. We are told that I think it's SOCO, that agency that was set up to investigate serious crimes. But when one looks at that agency's record of successful prosecution, you get zero. I do not recall reading of any successful prosecution by SOCO in any matter. Persons I've spoken with have no recollection of any successful prosecution by this agency either. In fact, it appears as though all save one matter that was taken to court by this agency ended up being dismissed following no case submissions. The only one that seemed to have made it past no case submission was the charge against the now Attorney General relative to some law books, when in fact it was determined that a case was properly made out against him, and he approached the High Court. And if my recollection is anything to go by, he was called upon to enter a defense. Well, we know the end of that case, having regard to the intervention of the Director of Public Prosecution following August 2nd, 2020. So it appears as though with all of what is being said and all the information being peddled across the mainstream and social media, it appears as though this matter is really going nowhere if it's handled locally. Hence, I reflect on the statement by the Office of the Leader of the Opposition. That statement calls for the involvement of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI of the United States, to be contacted for assistance in conducting these investigations. I've read in other places where other political leaders have called for the Caribbean or some other Caribbean police force to become involved in rendering assistance in the conduct of these investigations, having regard to the credibility or the assumed credibility of the Guyana police force in that regard. So here's where we are. Lots of allegations. But you know what? You recall that a former minister was accused of misconduct. You remember that former government minister declaring that he asked to be sent on leave to facilitate the investigation? And do you remember that the head of government declared that the minister, having asked, his request was satisfied and he was sent? Government agreed that he should go on leave. Well, in this case, the gentleman who is being investigated, according to those reports, in the news, it is suggested that this gentleman has asked to proceed on annualized vacation leave. And according to police release, the protocols were satisfied and the gentleman was facilitated. But I do not know that the commissioner of police or any officer or official in the Guyana police force has the authority to authorize annual leave to an officer that senior. But again, I may not know everything. I do not know everything, and I may not know this one for sure. But it appears to me as though it is the Police Service Commission that will be required to pronounce on matters such as annualized vacation leave for someone holding the rank of Assistant Police Commissioner or Assistant Commissioner of Police, I beg your pardon. So, is the Guyana Police Force on autopilot? I mean, here is someone who is facing allegations, someone who's under investigation, but that's someone determining, look, I am going on, I would like to go on annual leave, and I believe I should go. And the seniors say, okay, fine, you go. You know, there's no indication in any of these reports that administrative leave was considered or that interdiction from duty was considered, nothing at all. But we're in Guyana, and this is our reality. And the citizens of the country must determine, after deliberately considering these matters, what the position is. And I am deliberately sticking to press statements, news reports, and other publicly available information. Nation Watch will continue to update the citizens of this country on this matter and others as we move along. I want to turn my attention to another trending issue. There was a social media release attributed to Mr. Enrico Wolford, a very senior journalist of long standing in this country, who served, I believe, as CEO of the NCN a few years back. It is Mr. Enrico Wolford who reported that a minister of government, I'm trying to find his exact words because this particular matter is engaging a lot of threats of litigation, even external to the borders of Guyana. Here is what Enrico Wolford said. This matter is not before the court, so I believe I can read this and rely on it for conversation purpose. Enrico Wolford says, Guyana's Minister of Natural Resources, Vikram Bharat, was met, escorted off, and questioned by federal agents at the John F. Kennedy Airport last night, July 11, 2024. It is unclear why those particular investigating officers and not the usual diplomatic protocol officers would meet and escort Guyana's Minister of Natural Resources. This report was blown up to suggest that somebody was detained and questioned. I don't see that in Mr. Wolford's report, but again, But here's the troubling part for me as a citizen of this country. First, a permanent secretary was intercepted, was questioned, phone was confiscated and inquired into, and visa revoked. And then a senior police officer, again, police, was detained, I understand, and I use that word guardedly, and questioned by US federal authorities. And this report from Mr. Wolford seems to flow upwards in the hierarchy of governance, of government. And it's troubling. It's very, very troubling. And I go back to the statement from the office of the Leader of the Opposition. And I note that there's a starting point for all of this, it seems. The statement from the office of the leader of the opposition makes reference to the opposition having warned the People's Progressive Party about its refusal to investigate Second Vice President Bart Jagdeo, and that flowed from a report from Vice News where the allegations of corruption at that level were put to Mr. Jagdeo by an international journalist. And so, if in a society there are allegations of a certain nature at the very top, and those are not addressed, it seems to me that others below that level on the scale in the society will feel a sense of maybe, why don't I follow the lessons being taught by my seniors? Why don't I simply do what, others are doing? And it is really painful to recognize that our society, when it comes to corruption, is being eaten away at like a cancer. And these allegations against senior officials are not helping, they're not inspiring the society to combat this surge of corruption and corrupt practices. Now, we have had situations where, in this particular case, attorneys for the Honorable Minister have written to Mr. Wolford and demanded an apology and retraction and a conversation with respect to compensatory measures. And obviously, those demands have been accompanied by a threat of litigation. We've read again in the news this morning that Mr. Wolford has decided to stand his ground and has decided that he's not going to offer any apology or withdraw any statement, which suggests that Mr. Wolford is comfortable that he has what is required to properly defend himself in the face of a lawsuit. And as we know, truth goes to the whole of a defense. Truth is the complete defense against libel and allegations of libel. So Mr. Wolford evidently feels comfortable that he has truthfully reported and that he can defend himself. And then another social media activist, I believe they call them influencers, has stepped up and has made some comments. And those comments, whatever they were, has led to more threats of prosecution, of litigation. We see here on this Facebook post a comment under the name Sanjeev Dattadin, whom I believe is the attorney representing Mr. Barrett, saying to the social media commentator, that you make sure that he's here and given the opportunity in court to test the statement that he made. So there appears to be a question of, do we really have freedom of speech? Can we publicly discuss issues in this country, in this society, without the threat of litigation? So if that is in fact the case, the poor people of this country, and we have a poverty rate of 53%, am I to understand that 53% or more of our citizens can no longer participate in the exercise of freedom of speech? Because if they do, notwithstanding the premise of their statements being rooted in truth and in fact, that they must not utter these truths, they must not utter these facts because someone with a whole bag of money, someone who can pay for the services of high-level attorneys at law, will take such persons to court. And because they have no means of defending themselves, they have no access to money to retain equally competent attorneys at law, that they will have to put their pride on the line, their dignity out of the picture, and apologize for speaking the truth in the face of money and powerful attorneys. Is that where Guyana is really going, my fellow Guyanese? Can we no longer participate in discussions publicly, bringing the truth to bear, because we fear that someone will take us to court, because we fear that the Cybercrime Act will be triggered and that we will be placed in prison for speaking the truth, because we do not have the means to acquire the services of an attorney at law to defend us and to make it clear that we were in fact speaking the truth, that we were in fact making statements on the premise of fact, because we're undefended, because we don't have the resources to defend ourselves. What is Guyana really coming to? What has Guyana come to? This is ridiculous. Look, life in Guyana is worse now than that period of time when we had no oil. It seems to me that all that is happening is triggered by the wealth or potential wealth of this country and who is in control of it and who wants control of it. But I would leave that for the moment, having I believe discussed it in some length. I want to move to some other matters equally troubling but less controversial. I note that there is growing disrespect, and I've said this before, and the evidence continues to grow in that regard. Growing disrespect for Indigenous peoples in this country. It is now almost institutionalized disrespect. Philip Duncan, JP, AA, died on the 29th of June, 2024. Mr. Duncan entered Parliament at the age of 22, served as parliamentary secretary in a number of ministries, served as Minister of State in a number of ministries, unbroken service for 15 years, demitted office at the age of 37. 37. The age at which most Guyanese start to recognize the need to occupy elected office. Philip Duncan, by 37, had demitted office, having been the first Indigenous Guyanese citizen to be elected to the National Assembly of the Parliament of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, or rather of independent Guyana, because when he became a parliamentarian, we were not yet republic. So I take that back. Philip Duncan traveled this country, tractor, trailer, Land Rover, horseback, boat, foot, went out there in the execution of his duties to meet, interact with, provide leadership and support for the people of hinterland Guyana, mostly indigenous peoples. He served his country with distinction and in 2016 was awarded the Golden Arrow of Achievement. Philip Duncan became a minister of religion, having left the realm of politics and government ministry. There are some protocols that must be observed when a national awardee is being laid to rest. I've been to a few funerals of deceased national awardees, and I've seen the protocol in operation. And I reflect on the funeral service for the late Philip Duncan, and I looked at the program. Included in that program were one, tribute by the Regional Democratic Council. No one showed up. 2, 21 gun salute at the cemetery by the Guyana Defense Force. No one showed up. There was no representative from the municipality of Lethem, where Philip Duncan lived for decades, having been born in Ishalton. There was no representative from the Regional Democratic Council at his funeral service, although they all know him or knew him, although they all professed to have had respect for him while he lived, and although his nephew is the regional executive officer of Region 9, no one showed up at the funeral service. And I'm not here talking about whether they contributed biscuit or coffee to the wake. I'm speaking specifically about the funeral service and the protocols that ought to have been in place. There is usually a Guyana Defense Force personnel in official ceremonial wear who would stand guard at the head of that casket of the national awardee, and there will be the symbol of the national award, that medal, on a cushion, either on a chair or in the hand of that army personnel. And I believe we have a picture of a sample of such. And this is the basic protocol. This is not about whether you liked the person who is in that casket or whether you respect that person or you respected that person as they lived. This is a matter of the person having done sufficient to be considered, vetted, and awarded a national award. This is about the protocol of giving credit where credit is due. This is about protecting and revering the actual symbol of the award having been bestowed upon an honorable citizen of this country. A simple thing like this, please bring this picture closer up on the entire screen for me. A simple execution of a protocol of this nature would have paid the kind of respect, would have demonstrated the kind of respect being paid to a gentleman who was given the kind of service to his country as Mr. Philip Duncan did. But no, at the last moment, I understand from the family that the Guyana Defense Force called to say they will no longer be able to participate in the proceedings. When asked, it is reported that whomever from the Guyana Defense Force was in contact with the family said that Duncan was not active at the time of his death. Well, neither was Oscar Clark. Oscar Clark wasn't active either. Neither was Sister Mary Williams from the Essequibo Coast active. And neither were so many other national awardees who passed away in their old age. But protocol is protocol. Why would the Guyana Defense Force, the government of Guyana, treat Mr. Philip Duncan the way they did, the shabby way that they did? Is it because he's indigenous? That's the first question that comes to mind. Is it because he's indigenous Guyanese that he didn't deserve to be treated like any other Guyanese? Is that the question? Is that the kind of question that resonated prior to the determination of the Guyana Defense Force not being in a position to continue or to participate in this ceremony? Is this the regard that we have for indigenous Guyanese citizens who've made their mark in this country? This is uninspiring. The People's Progressive Party must explain to the indigenous community of this country why Philip Duncan was treated in death as shabbily as he was. And this is not up for debate. This is a demand I'm making on behalf of the indigenous peoples of this country in general and the Philip Duncan family in particular. This is outrageous treatment. This is the kind of treatment that we as indigenous people in this country must bear in mind always. We must remember how shabbily we have been treated, and at the appropriate time we must do something about it. We cannot allow this to continue. Why was there no representative from the People's Progressive Party controlled municipality of Lethem? Why was there no representative from the People's Progressive Party controlled Regional Democratic Council of the Upper Takutu, Upper Essequibo, Region 9? Why? Especially when the nephew of the deceased national awardee is the serving REO of that region. I saw Pauline Sukai, Minister of Marine Affairs in Lethem on Friday, the day before the funeral. Why could she not have attended the funeral on behalf of indigenous leadership in the People's Progressive Party? Even if the People's Progressive Party snubs indigenous people, you are one of us, Pauline Sukai. You should have stood up. You should have gone there, even if you were acting outside of the belief and instruction of your political party. You are an indigenous person. You must demonstrate that you care about indigenous people, but no, you do not, and therefore you are not there. Instead, what was Pauline Sukai doing? Pauline Sukai was there to host a regional Tushaus conference, something that is not even provided for in the Amerindian Act, laws of Guyana. But because the National Tushaus Council Conference is scheduled for August 19 to 23rd, Pauline Sukai feels it necessary to assemble regional leaders of indigenous peoples and attempt to manipulate them so they can get elected into office of the NTC executive, the kind of people that she, Pauline Sukai, is comfortable with, that the People's Progressive Party would like to see elected. Why else would you meet and call a regional Tushaus conference when nothing in the law provides for it? Is that your demonstration of love and respect for indigenous people? To go and use every opportunity to manipulate them to achieve your political ends? Well, even if that is so, take one little bit of shame out of your face, as your people would say, and present yourself at the funeral of a national awardee, an indigenous person, the first ever indigenous parliamentarian after independence in this country, the second youngest parliamentarian in the history of this country, a gentleman with 15 years unbroken service in the parliament of this country, a gentleman with a distinguished career, a gentleman, the first ever indigenous Guyanese to address the United Nations. We will all meet that fateful day once. We will all exit this physical world once. But the way we treat those who go before us may well determine how we are treated when our time comes. But what about this Regional Two-Shows Council conference? The law provides for district councils. The APNU AFC government, while in office, adhered to the law, and there was one district council that came into being. There are many lined up with applications, but none are being considered by this People's Progressive Party administration. But there are issues taking place in Region 9 that are not being paid attention to. Daily flyovers, small planes, single-engine small planes will show you what type of aircraft are flying from. This is not the aircraft that was seen, or this is not among the aircrafts that have been seen. But this is a type of aircraft that reports say are frequently crossing from the Brazilian side to Parabara or nearby Parabara in Deep South Rupununi. Why would aircrafts come to Guyana frequently and leave Guyana frequently? Why would they remain undetected when there's a Guyana Defense Force base at Lethem? Do they not do patrols anymore? Is there no longer an intelligence wing of the Guyana Defense Force? Don't they go out there, mix and meddle with the people and conduct investigations and surveillance? These are questions that need to be answered. It is apparent to me that no intelligence work is being done. Had intelligence work been ongoing, then these flights would have been detected and measures taken to apprehend the aircrafts and the operators of those aircrafts. But this is what's happening in Parabara, and it's happening multiple flights per day on some days. And then over at Marudi Mountain, which is, the Marudi Mountain is an area of Guyana's territory that the Wapichan people have laid claim to, making it clear that these are traditional lands belonging to the Wapichan people. These have got to be considered by the government of Guyana, whichever government sits there. So far, this particular government has been ignoring it. There were measures being taken while the APNU AFC was in government to deal with the question of illegal mining in that area with some measure of success. However, reports coming out of Marudi suggest that it has now the appearance of a Brazilian frontier town. We'll show you a couple of pictures of what's happening in Parabara, what it looks like. I'm very sorry, not Parabara, but Marudi Mountain. You see the nature and size of equipment that are being used in mining there. And these mining operations are being spearheaded, I understand, largely by Brazilian miners. The chief immigration officer may want to inquire into whether or not these miners are here legally. And the Guyana Geology and Mines Commission may wish to inquire as to whether they have lawful permission from that agency to operate as they are operating or at all in the Marudi Mountain area. So this is what Guyana has been reduced to. Nobody seems to know anything. Everyone seems to be acting on their own. It appears as though many institutions and many operations and perhaps even a few ministries might be on autopilot. But it is the citizen of this country, it is the citizenry of this country that must determine whether Guyana is being governed properly or at all. And as we go closer and closer to elections, whenever they come, we as citizens of this country must make decisions. And those decisions must be firmly based on actual information available to us. Nation Watch attempts to bring to the citizenry of this country each Sunday, by God's grace, information that will help to make those decisions. We at Nation Watch believe that the sitting government of Guyana is without vision, is without purpose except personal enrichment, and is without focus. Clearly, there is no plan for the development of this country. Any government led by or including the People's National Congress reform will implement that people-centered development strategy that our leader, Aubrey Compton Norton, has been presenting in parts to this country, in the National Assembly, in his Congress speech, in press conferences, in frequent interaction with journalists, both locally and internationally. It is evident that Aubrey Norton, leader of the People's National Congress reform and leader of the parliamentary opposition, is the only political leader in this country with a plan for the development of this country. Unlike the sitting head of government, who has publicly declared that there's insufficient time for planning, and so they do project by project as the need arises. So we must guard jealously our territorial integrity. We must protect ourselves and our country from corruption and corrupt leaders. We must ensure that the Guyana Police Force is depoliticized and becomes a professional entity again. We must ensure that all of our state agencies adhere to their constitutional mandate and operate in the best interests of the people of this country. This is our responsibility, each of us as citizens of this country. We have that responsibility. And we must understand that in the exercise of that responsibility, we must not go out there and wildly make accusations against person and expose ourselves to the trending, growing levels of prosecution for cybercrimes and of litigation for slander. Let's stick to the facts and let's discuss these issues with a view to obtaining a clearer understanding and to sharing that understanding with those around us, so that eventually, whenever they come, regional and general elections will see the removal of the People's Progressive Party from government, and will see this country move on an upward trajectory when it comes to development and when it comes to the growth and development of our education sector, our mining sector, and all other sectors in this country, and proper management of our oil resources. At the center of it all are the people of this country. The chief beneficiaries must be the people of this country. We must listen to our people, and as the next government, the PNC-led APNU, whether together or apart with the Alliance for Change, must make this country and will make this country a better place. Aubrey Compton Norton is a president under construction. He is a president under construction. He holds the future of this country and its citizens in the palm of his hand, because the people of this country will embrace Aubrey Norton as the agent of change for taking this country forward. And all of these conversations that we've had, including the one we've had today, will be things of the past as we chart a course for the development of a new, free, and prosperous Guyana. That's all we have time for today on Nation Watch. Until we meet again, God bless.